Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Agile Diaries. I'm excited to be joined with you today. Um, as you guys kind of remember and might know from the past couple of sessions we have, Agile Diaries is where we talk about real life practical examples, bringing you experience based lessons from the field where we unpack ideas, knowledge around a current issue. Today, we're going to talk about how we can respond to and effectively handle unexpected events and change, whether it's in our personal lives at an individual level or professional lives at an organizational level. What do we do when something unexpected happens? What do we do when an unexpected event occurs that's not according to our plan? Whether we were just laid off or a company's facing a pandemic that's jeopardizing the viability of our business, how can we apply some lean and agile principles, practices, and tools to respond to these changes faster and more effectively? Our guest today, I'm very excited to have him, is Mr. Shane Stever. And before I pull him in, let me give you a little bit of background. Shane has extensive experience in helping hospital and physician organizations to plan and implement healthcare revenue cycle technologies and operations. And in fact, over the past few years, he has been focused on helping healthcare software companies to build out their implementation services and operations, which is why I'm excited to have Shane with us today. Shane, welcome to the show. Glad to have you. How are you, man?
Doing great, Saman. Happy to be here. Longtime fan of the show. Longtime fan.
Thanks. We've been live and active and for only a few weeks, but I'm really happy that you're on time fan.
Big time fan.
Big time fan. So am I, Shane. I got to tell you, I'm a big time fan, and I think before we even jump into the topic of how do we handle change effectively, I wanted to talk a little bit about what led to us getting together, and so I'm a big fan of yours as well, and so it's actually one of your posts recently that you shared, and I thought it was a great post, and I want you to kind of talk a little bit about it. But I remember reading about the post, and it was all around responding to a change that many people are actually experiencing right now in the industry. And it was about how to respond to layoffs, which is something that we're seeing a lot of, especially with the tech companies. They're doing that. And you provided some really good tools and advice. And why we were talking about it, I don't know if you knew this inadvertently or not, but I recognized that you were actually applying a lot of the principles and tools and practices that we talk about and we learn within the agile space to solve this problem and to kind of handle it. So I'd love to, hear more about it, and I'm sure our audience would love to hear kind of more about your experience, what that was like, and maybe we can dive into that a little bit more.
Like I'm sure many of those watching will recall, there is a recent wave this summer. We've seen quite a lot of layoffs in the tech space, and my LinkedIn feed is full of those examples as well. And as someone who in years past has lived through two separate layoffs, I have more experience than I would like uh, with dealing with layoffs, and I have some advice that I've over the years have given people about how to respond. And so what the article is about is, first of all, just relating to how scary and how anxiety inducing that situation can be. I've even seen some posts on LinkedIn referencing the fact like, hey, I just got laid off. I've got a wife and two kids and one on the way. And it just really paints that picture that this is a very difficult time for people to go through when you suddenly lose your job, especially when you didn't do anything wrong. It's not your fault that you were laid off, right? It's just part of, unfortunately, you draw the short stick on that aspect of our business environment, right? And so the top piece of advice I give in the article, which is a little bit unconventional, is that if you suddenly lost your job, go to the gym. A lot of people will give you advice about how to apply and how to interview, and there's a lot of great information out there about that. But the thing that helped me as I was working through these difficult times in the past was setting up that regimen, committing to the routine of focusing on my physical health which of course has massive mental health benefits as well. And making that the priority. It's not like do the job search first, and if you have time, work out. It's,
Mhm.
commit to a workout regimen of some kind, and the rest will fall more into place. So I hope that was helpful to people. I think, you won't feel like it is important to remember. There's ups and downs in that job search. You're going to get a lot of no's as you apply for new roles. And emotionally, you won't feel like going to the gym or doing yoga or whatever it is you like to do. So committing to that regimen will give you that sense of agency and accomplishment that'll help push you through the low points in your job search. So I was glad to be able to contribute that, and I think people have found it helpful. I hope so.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think from the reactions, the responses, a lot of people found it helpful. And I thought it was very encouraging. And in case this is helpful for any of the audience members that are watching and listening, I've had a lot of friends and colleagues who have gone through the same experience, um, and it's outside of your control, and I think it has nothing to do. Most of the time it's really nothing to do about you, and it's just kind of outside of the control and it's the current business. And what's interesting is many of them are actually um, in places career wise that are, I would say, probably, you know better from a career and advancement kind of than they would have been if that event didn't happen. And some of them have actually been more successful than some of the peers. And so I think, the ability to actually find the opportunity and capitalize on that change is huge, but it is an emotional impact, and that's certainly a real thing. I think all of us would experience that shock at first. But I think, um, what I would love to talk a little bit about is, and you and I talked about this offline, when we were discussing the post, is how, like, this is a different world than it was like 20, 30 years ago, the world that our parents lived in. And changes now, like, just a constant. It's something that's going to happen. It's a normal. While it's always disruptive and we don't want it to happen, and we want to, we have a plan, we have a strategy, it's going to happen. And I think that's the shift that, first thing that we just need to recognize is, in today's world, like, change is going to be a constant. So the question is, how do we prepare and set ourselves up to actually be able to um, make a change, pivot, react, respond to that change more effectively?
I think it's
Um,
helpful to look at examples where we already do this in business and in our personal lives. Look at ITSM management. You've probably been a part of an organization that had a major outage of some kind, a so-called major incident, which is an official designation in that framework that has a specific protocol. You've probably seen it. You get the regular updates on the resolution of the problem, and they're saying, here's our ETA on getting it solved. It's not like someone thought to do that day and said, we should really let everyone know
and here's
about.
a great protocol that I just came up with. Let me just
Yeah,
quickly send an email about
let's
it.
let me make a template for this communication and everything it's going to need on the fly. No, that was all prepared in advance. It was triggered automatically because when seconds count, when minutes count, we have to rely on protocol to move fast. Otherwise, it's a circus. It's a clown car, and it becomes that, what's that word we use? Fire drill, right? This is something that's always cracked me up because I've been a part of so-called fire drills in the work environment that I wish were more like real life fire drills, right? The kind where the alarm goes off and everyone walks out of the
Right.
building. That's a fire drill in the literal sense. And the thing about it is, there's a plan. Like,
There's a
people,
plan.
there's a
Exactly.
plan. You don't. It's not like fire drill has become a euphemism in work for something that is crazy and has no defined process
An
and
accident, like,
an
oh, we did
accident.
not
Yeah,
know. This is like, the team is in the middle of, whether, especially if they're doing Scrum, and maybe they've, adopted some of the Agile principles. they're in the middle of a sprint, and leadership gets some, get some information, or is asked to make sure that, oh wow, like some problem has surfaced, probably a problem that's been around for a while, but now it's actually become a real problem. And they come in and they're like, we got to stop everything, stop it, we've got a major issue. And then, yeah, I love it. And I think it's like you get those emails where it's pretty dramatic sometimes. The emails are like, we must do this and we must do that. And people call it a fire drill, but it's really not a fire drill, because it's not a drill. It's a real thing that's happening. And it's very disruptive. It can be very disruptive.
Right.
Yeah. So
We call it putting out fires. We're going to put out the fire. It's just kind of interesting to me that everyone likes to talk about how we have to put out fires at work, but we're not having real fire drills. We're not actually defining escalation protocols, like we do for that major incident example, or like we do in our personal lives, or think about hospital operations. um,
right.
Anyone who's been in big B2B implementation software IT advisory work like I have knows that for every computer system, you need to have downtime procedures. Downtime procedures. You plan for the failure. And it's interesting
Especially
to
in
me that we
hospital
don't,
settings.
yeah,
And
especially because it's critical, right? We get
your
24/7,
EMR
365.
system has a lot of issues or some downtime, but you have patients. You need to keep the business running. So yeah, I mean that's what do you do when you have downtime? You have to have protocols and procedures, right?
You do, and the same concept, and this kind of gets into um, what my post was sort of the point of it was, is what are the downtime procedures for your personal life?
Yeah.
What are the plans you've made, for when things happen? And so there are personal finance considerations there. That's why financial advisors will recommend that you have 3 to 6 months of expenses on hand. That's a good thing to do if you're able to. Most Americans cannot, unfortunately. But if you're in a place where you can plan that way, that's a great thing to do. It's great to keep that network warm. And then a big one that I think is not very popular because it takes a little extra work is keeping a work journal. And this has a lot of agile crossover. The I started doing this years ago, is kind of every week or every other week, bullet out my major accomplishments for the week. And even sometimes what I'm looking to do in the week to come. And I keep this on my personal. I don't, obviously, there's no like intellectual property or anything like that. It's just kind of referencing, here's what we got live, here's what we accomplished, here's how we built the team out, here's how we improved our operation. And then I look back a year later and I have this continuous record of everything I did. And
Right.
that comes in handy in so many ways, not the least of which would be when you go to dust off that resume and you're looking for your next gig, you've got the receipts, right? You've got this long record of things you would have forgotten, but that you did. That's good work. It's good to be able to have that on hand.
It's good work. And I think, we were talking about this before the session. You were sharing some of this stuff, and one of the things that I picked up as well that you touched on is, not only were you talking about, just kind of capturing, hey, what were some of the things that I worked on, what were the accomplished, but I loved how you also reflected on, hey, what went well this week, what were some of the things that could have gone better, or could have maybe we could improve on, and coming up with a couple actionable items that would then try to apply in the coming week or so. And in that way, and I was like, Shane, what you're doing is essentially a retrospective.
Right.
In Scrum we call it a retrospective, and it's just a concept of continuous improvement as well. And I think the thing that happened that I really like about what you're doing, because you're bringing it to your personal life, is it goes back to, you got laid off, and the last thing you probably want to do is exercise, right? Um, and that's true with anything, whether it's your personal life or in the professional setting. You may have been working on this project. You guys have been planning. Are in the middle of design. You're doing development. You're doing sprints. You're doing demos. The team is in a rhythm, and an interruption happens. the last thing you want to do is probably some of the things that you should be doing
Mhm.
exactly, because it's kind of discouraging, right? Here comes another change, but you made it a routine, and you made it your routine. You put it on a cadence, so you kind of, you know, automated this new habit. End of every week at this specific time, I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna reflect. And I thought and that totally resonates with the agile principles that we have. And it's like reflecting frequently on how things are going, and finding opportunities for improvement, but also celebrating the victories. And in addition to that, as a byproduct, is you have this record of all the stuff that you can look back on. And I think that's a great tip too, is because you forget all of the things that you work on, and experiences that you've had that you can tap into.
Feedback is the catalyst of growth, right? Continuous feedback. Insights are the core of feedback, and feedback is a gift. It's
It
rare.
is a gift. Yeah,
we we
we talked
don't
about that.
we don't realize this. I think because we grow up, many of us in school, through college, maybe you've got an advanced degree, and so for most of our lives up until adulthood, we're getting constant feedback on everything we do all the time. You literally get a grade, 100, 81, whatever it is.
Or in the
um,
class, you just immediately you
yeah.
have pop quiz, or there's questions, and you know exactly where you get immediate feedback, and you get it frequently, which I think is the key thing too.
So then you're 20 something years old, you step into the work world, and suddenly feedback is nowhere to be found. And it's no surprise that
Or you get it once a year, or maybe you get it,
you get it
you
once a
know,
year, and a lot of companies don't do a great job of doing, performance management and performance reviews, right? So it's honestly difficult. It's pretty rare that you're in a situation where you're getting great feedback on a regular basis. And what's great about work journaling is that you are creating insights. It's like planting a seed. You're creating insights for yourself for free, where no one has to give these insights to you. But you can see for yourself, hey, I've had the same thing on my next week list for 3 weeks running. Maybe something with my, let's call it like velocity or burn rate, right? Like I've underestimated how much work this would take. And that by itself is an example of a powerful insight that you can derive from yourself for free, just by
for free.
writing things down on a regular basis and going back and reviewing them. It's worth the time. No growth happens without those insights, without that feedback, and it's hard to get from other people.
That's true. That's true. Which also kind of, so yeah, I think one of the takeaways for the audience is especially when it comes to, like, layoffs, and just in general, even if you're not, is having that frequent routine where you pause and make it the same time, make it the same, where you pause and you actually reflect what went well, what could go better, what could be better, and then what are some actionable items we take away from that. And then that's fundamental. Like, we do that in Scrum. Teams do that usually if your sprints are 2 weeks long, you do that at the end of the sprint, right? You pause, and we can now bring that to our personal lives, do the same thing. Um, but the other thing we talked about, which goes back to responding to change, and is the second part of that, which you also said, all right, well, maybe I underplanned some stuff. Maybe I did that, or let's take a look at next week, and let's see what's happening next week. And that's where you have an opportunity to make adjustments, and you pivot to your, kind of the path that you're going down on. And so if you have some major surprises, life events, things that come up, you actually have a routine where you frequently pause and you replan, and you start to think about. And so when you have that routine, you're more likely to respond to that change faster, right? There's no like, okay, well, now I have to pause. Now I have to rethink everything. It's like, no, I got a routine. Every Friday, this is what I do. I'm going to pause. Every Friday, Thursday. And now it's like, okay, that's the point in time. Let me wrap up everything that I was kind of focused on, make sure I leave it in a good place. Let me transition it, switch it over, and then now I can focus on next week. So I think that's some of the stuff that that I wanted to call out from our conversations offline for our audience, and it's all a lot of the stuff we talk about, we teach, and we apply from a Scrum and Agile standpoint.
100%. And not just routine, by the way. I think one thing that I'm a big fan of is not just having routine and cadence and ritual, and these are all important agile concepts as well. But what are the guiding principles that you will fall back onto as you make your next step, right? The business version of this is understanding what the business's key core competencies, mission and values are. And in a well-run business, every role, every responsibility, every person who works for the company should be able to draw that straight line back from what they do every day to the core mission and purpose, and be strategically aligned with that competency model. And this is intense sort of organizational work that a lot of companies never quite get to. But when you do experience that interruption where you've got to go back and restart or pick things back up, what are we doing? We're concerned with the customer, right? We're concerned with the requirements. We are concerned with what's the big thing we're trying to accomplish, and then let's retool to continue down that path. So in your personal life, the comparison there, the parallel is a person's core values. If you just got laid off, you find yourself on the job market, this is often a good opportunity to pivot, to change. I highly recommend people to take inventory of their core values. And I'm not making news here. The benefits of understanding your own core values and, taking the hour or two, or think through it over a weekend and look at a word bank and think what's important to me. And I put my core values on my resume. And the reason for that is that I think employers are hiring a person, and I think they deserve to know, and it's in my best interest that they understand what are the most important things to me as a person, right? And
I
once you
love
have a
that.
clear
That's
vision
fantastic.
once you have a clear vision of that for yourself, it makes it easier to navigate the job market. It makes it easier to make decisions. If you have multiple offers, you can consult your core values and say, well, where am I most aligned here? Because lots of common sense and research shows that if you are doing something that is in conflict with your core values, that tends to not go well. These are things about
It
yourself that
keeps
you
you
can't
aligned.
change.
Yeah, it keeps you aligned. And you know what? Yeah, the parallel that you drew with personal life and organizational is, yeah, your core values are not going to change much. They're going to stay the same. Likewise, maybe your long-term career aspirations, goal, and vision is not going to change as much either. It's probably something that's going to change less frequently. Similarly, in the corporate world, so is our strategy. I mean, I could say probably will change more frequently now compared to 20, 30 years ago. But your vision and strategy, more or less, especially your vision, it's something that's going to probably stay the same. You're going to change it less frequently. And so the key thing is, while that doesn't change, how you get there may change. And so when changes happen, unexpected events happen, by having protocols and mechanisms and cadence and routines in place to actually evaluate what that change is and figure out, all right, what's a different path that we can take to get to that vision? That change is hopefully most of the time is less disruptive because now I have a protocol. I know what my long term goal is. And I think the beautiful thing, one of the awesome things you said is you put it on your resume, you make it visible, not only for yourself, but I think the great thing is if I'm scanning candidates and interviewing people, you make it easier for them too, for the employer, because the employer is like, oh, okay, this person, these are their values, this is what they chose as their most important values. Is this in alignment with kind of our values? And it also leads to great discussion and conversation, I think, too, because you can kind of elaborate on it. So it makes communication much more effective. It keeps you aligned, and I think it brings visibility to the people that are interviewing, so it helps them. So I think that's wonderful.
I mean,
Um,
high trust relationships are essential for any business, working
Absolutely.
environment. And the thing about being in touch with your core values is one of the many benefits is that it makes you more trustworthy. And the reason for that is that integrity is foundational for trust. And by
Yes.
integrity, what I mean is that your
And is that one of your
actions,
core values? Let me just for the audience. Is that?
actually, it is.
I
That's the
believe it is.
first one. That's the first one. And you know why? Because integrity is basically how much you value living out your values. It's kind of a meta value in a way. And so it's like I have my values, and it's important to me that everything I do and say is in alignment with that. I'm not saying I believe one thing and doing another. Like
Yes.
that
You're
sort of,
staying aligned.
yeah, that duplicity can be is it eviscerates trust, right? If you're perceived as someone who doesn't have integrity, someone who doesn't follow through on their commitments, doesn't say and do things that are in accordance with their professed values, then you really can't have a high trust relationship with that kind of person. And so, a great foundation for being a person of integrity and character is sitting down and thinking about, what is my character? What are my values? And do the work to write them out. Think hard about this. Like,
And
this
make
is
it
very
visible.
important. Make
Put
it
it in
visible.
front of you again, whether it's at your desk, you can have it on a wall, like, alongside of your kind of aspirations and
Right.
long-term goals from a career standpoint. Um, and you're making it visible for everyone else. So it makes it easier for others to understand. Okay, so that's who Shane is. That those are his core values, and it keeps you aligned.
We talk
Um,
about bringing the whole self to work, right?
mhm.
That's a very popular tagline, like, come work for this company, we're changing the world through software as a service, and you can bring your whole self to work
You're
here,
awesome.
and maybe
What
even
does
your
that
dog.
mean? Yeah,
Right? So, like, why wouldn't we start with that? I mean, that's the
exactly.
most foundational aspects of anyone's personality. How can you bring your whole self to work or to your next job interview if you haven't done the thinking, right, about what that means? How can I communicate to people what I'm all about using just a few words on one line of my resume? It's an extremely efficient way to set yourself up for success as you consider new opportunities. So,
That's great
um,
advice. That's fantastic.
and
I
I'm
think
not,
that's
again,
fantastic.
this is
Not
not
even if you're
new
looking
stuff.
for a job. I think in
Yes,
general, that's a fantastic advice. When something, and kind of bringing it back to, like, hey, when something unexpected happens, we tend to get away from those things. We tend to kind of go, and next thing you know, we're going down a whole path that's actually not aligned with our end goal, our vision, and sometimes our core values, right? Because we're reacting. We're panicking a little bit, if you want to say that, because we don't have those things in the forefront, and we haven't practiced it, and we don't have a routine where we regularly revisit those things, and not only use it as a reminder, but also use it as, hey, am I still aligned to these things? Is the path I'm going down and the things I'm doing this week and next week, is that still going to get me to where I need to be? And I think companies, they do the same thing, but if you want to take it to the corporate and organize at the company level, in order to effectively manage and respond to change, you do the same thing, on frequent, regular intervals, and make it something that is, kind of automatic, like every quarter on these dates, specifically first week of every quarter. Like, we're going to sit down, we're going to take a look at our vision, our strategy, make sure our core values are there in the back, like we see it. And first of all, like, do we need to change any of it? Is our vision changing because there's a pandemic, right? Or how we're getting there, does that need to change? And so reflect on that, make sure you're staying aligned. At the team level, if you're doing sprints, 2 week sprints, same thing. End of every sprint, go back to, hey, what's the purpose and vision for the product and solution or service that we're delivering, we're building out for our clients? And is the stuff that we're working on this sprint, next sprint, is that still aligned with that?
right.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And
Have we gotten away from our core competency? Maybe,
right.
like,
Yeah.
that's so
This
important
fire,
for that cycle.
is this fire something that, um requires us to revisit that goal and long-term goal, and let's have a conversation about that, as an organization. Or is this fire just something that is just, oh, okay, it happened. Actually, maybe we can capitalize on it. We can actually use this opportunity to still get to that end goal and vision. But we kind of tend to, shift off of it and go down a whole path because we get into panic mode. We don't have a routine. We don't have protocols.
Mhm.
We don't have downtime procedures for how to handle unexpected events.
Yeah. And you can have, I guess what we're ultimately suggesting here is that you can have a sort of kind of downtime procedure for your life, right? Like
Yes.
and I think part of self-actualization and development as an adult, as a professional, is developing resiliency. Because if one thing's for sure, bad stuff will happen to you in your life, right?
Change,
Change is
unexpected change
constant,
will happen.
and some of that change will be bad change, right? And we need to be able to recover and adapt to those. Our
Yeah.
species has a very long history of adapting. We're very adaptable creatures, and
You,
we all have the capacity to adapt and to do that well. But part of that capacity is your planning capacity, and it only helps you if you use it. So um,
yeah, and you're not
Plans
going
in
to feel
advance.
like doing it. You're not going to feel like doing it when sometimes these bad events happen, bad changes. You're not going to feel like sitting down. But if you put it on some sort of make it a routine, put it on a cadence, um, actually practice it too. If you want to really take it to the next level, you can have real fire drills, for your personal life, um, and practice. Hey, unexpected event happened. How do I respond to that? Go back to your procedures and protocols, at a personal level. And as a team, establish, hey, when we're in the middle of a sprint or middle of a project, somebody comes down and I think we were talking about this and you used the term and I thought it was funny is because fires can be really noisy, right? And they can be really disruptive and they can make
Yep.
people, not have come up with the best ideas and ways to close out what they're working on, and it could actually lead to a lot of waste. So and we call jungle rules kicks in, right?
Right.
Jungle loudest voice wins, and so sometimes that loudest voice and that those jungles actually could lead to a lot of negative things and set us bets. But if we have protocols, we have procedures, maybe we practiced it, um, they're going to kick in automatically, hopefully, and we can actually pivot faster and we can manage that change more effectively because we have a plan for unexpected changes. Right.
Yeah, because if you don't, I mean, the default that what's the phrase here? Gravity's constant. If you don't plan for failures like this for the fires, then the result is jungle rules. We devolve into jungle creatures, and it is whoever is screaming the loudest. And by the way, they're
Right.
not just screaming; they're also tagging like the CEO and copying, the
We
entire.
must do this, otherwise we will
Yeah,
all crash and burn. Yeah, that's
and suddenly this the exercise of dealing with the fire has become extremely expensive because you've pulled
very
in
expensive.
all these people that maybe don't need to do it. You lay out all the problems, and maybe you're a customer and account management or salesperson or customer success or something, and so your primary concern is the customer's unhappy, but you've
Right.
tagged the entire engineering leadership team, and so like how were they supposed to help? No one's
Has this happened
PMing.
recently? It's a very specific example. No, that's a
This has happened so many. I've witnessed this
yeah.
so many times, right? And we've put in some things. I've been a part of efforts to put in things to help with that, right? Here's one example taken from the military. Is an S bar. You're probably familiar with this format for laying out, the a problem and what we recommend and our whatever assessment is it.
Right, right.
The S bars were developed for like nuclear submarines, where you needed, if there was some issue that was very time sensitive, and you needed to convey all the necessary information in a very short, concise format.
They
The
had a
developer,
protocol.
they
They
had a
had a
protocol.
protocol. You have a procedure, um, and I think that's nothing new, but I think we just forget. to do that as a team. And I think the other thing is build in some regular mechanisms by which you have the opportunity to pause, reflect, and pivot, and make that part of your routine. So maybe that's part of the downtime procedure, or like part of the procedure is an emergency happens based on the critical level of that emergency. Is that something that maybe we can talk about Friday? Because Friday is the time where we reflect and we replan. And this is something we need to address now. If it's something we need to address now, okay, what's our procedure for that? What's our protocol on that? Okay, we need to inform our stakeholders, the ones that we're working stuff, doing stuff for now, right? Maybe we need to let them know, or we need to figure out. There's a lot. Having even a protocol for things that you have never anticipated before as well. How do we handle that? Another thing I know I'm kind of getting excited about this is you talk about the journal. Another great thing about that is you capture how many times, what happened that week, what went well. And if you start to have too many interruptions and too many fires, now you can have like a record of that, and you can actually bring that and speak to that and say, hey, change is fine and all, we welcome it, but too much change might be, like not really good. Like we're going to be, things are moving too much that we can't even get anything done, right?
You can identify those trends and say,
Trends,
like,
exactly.
and just it's more granular data, because the way this might present in operational metrics is our time to live is constantly suffering, or we're struggling to hit our release dates on time, but it might not tell you kind of why, or what
Why?
exactly is the type of problem we're encountering. And so by creating that data log, essentially is what it
Exactly.
is, of
Metrics
what
of some
went
sort.
wrong with a higher level of granularity, maybe the changes that we implement systemically will be more tightly focused on what the precise cause, the root
It
cause
helps
of
us to
these
get to the
issues are.
root cause. The
Right.
root cause, because you actually have,
The
and
insights.
this doesn't mean you should go overboard and like capture every little detail. I think it's just kind of like, hey, what happened? And then, with teams that are doing Scrum and Agile, big thing is velocity, right? How much work you got done because you have a unit of measure that you use to determine the size of the work. And when the work is done, it becomes a part of your velocity. So by capturing this information, and you can bring it at the end of every sprint during retrospectives, you also can see, oh, hey, why is our velocity crashing over the past month and a half, like significantly crashing? Oh, hey, here's kind of what we captured historically. It seems like we had a lot of interruptions.
Yeah.
And so that
And
gives you the information to have the conversation with the right stakeholders to say, hey, look, like this is actually not helping you. It's not helping anybody. Maybe there's a more effective way. Maybe there's a better way.
yeah, and the routine ends up being so important there, because of course the insights captured in your retrospectives are only useful if you go back and consume them and think about them. And so the parallel there being a personal work journal of sorts. One little thing I do for myself, and I think everyone will have their own tricks that they can play on themselves to get them to go back and read those things and derive those insights, is I'll just put little jokes that are like just to myself in my work journal, so that when I'm reading them later, it's funny because I forget that I put the joke in there, and that motivates me to go back and like find these little Easter eggs in
Jungle
my work journal.
creatures.
Yeah.
Moving away from jungle creatures to professionals.
Right. How are we in that evolution from jungle
Yes,
creature
where are we in that evolution?
to seasoned executive? Somewhere in the middle.
No, I love that. I love all this because this is exactly why I want to do this interview, because there's just, people think about a lot of the stuff that we apply, and they're really smart tips that you're sharing. Um, they're essentially aligned with a lot of the things that Scrum recommends, and with the Agile principles. We do it in the work setting. Well, we can actually apply a lot of this variation of it in our personal lives, and it will help us to handle changes more effectively. Change is hard. It sucks. Something, a lot of times, especially when you get connected to something. So, Shane, this is great stuff. I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing this stuff with us, including the the analogies that you used to. That's made the conversation really fun. But any other things? I know there was a lot. We could probably go on for hours and hours. But any other big tips that you felt like kind of really helped during the process that the change that you recently experienced?
Um, I think honestly, going back to the core values is the biggest thing. If you suddenly lose your job, it's not just your income. A lot of it's the structure. A lot of it's the way you're managing your time, and that sudden change and that structure being that scaffolding kind of being ripped out of your life can be traumatic. It can be very
Very
difficult for
dramatic.
people to go through. And if you happen to be one of the people, and many people fall into this trap of assigning their personal worth and their value to their job and what they do to make money, then that can hit especially hard, right? When you lose your job, suddenly you don't just lose a job, you lose your sense of self worth. And now we're talking about
Hmm.
a full blown crisis, right? So I would say some of your listeners, some of the viewers might think it sounds like that guy's done some therapy, and my answer is yeah, I have, and I think you should too. I think everyone should go to therapy. So if there's one tip I would leave out there for people
Get
navigating
a
any
coach.
any
Get a
period,
therapist.
yeah, any period of tumultuous change in your life, consider
They're
investing.
experts.
Yeah, right. We consult experts for business, right? Why don't we consult experts for the rest of our life, for our emotional regulation, for the health of our relationships, our marriages, our relationships with our children and our parents? These are just like, you can't be a productive and effective professional if those core foundational things in your life are not there. And so I'm a
Yeah.
big proponent, I always have been, of therapy for people who are going through, see a therapist. Now there's lots of, chat apps you can use and telehealth
There's AI
therapy.
therapists you can talk to. No,
There's AI
okay.
therapists
You know
who
how they
probably
don't.
don't understand what's going on. Um,
Yeah.
you
Feedback
know,
has been mixed on the AI therapists, but
yeah. Well, I don't think we're quite there yet on the AI
we're not
therapists.
quite there yet. That'll be episode 300. No, but I think it's get there's experts out there who are very good at helping people through change, managing change. There's communities, there's a lot of things. That's fantastic. Yeah, get seek expertise, and I think yeah, put some of this stuff into a routine. Put a routine, put it in place, because if it becomes a habit, it's much easier to do the things you don't want to do, which is actually going to help you to overcome and manage and kind of handle these changes faster.
Yep.
Right.
You'd be surprised. You find yourself, on the other end of that, of another no for a big job opportunity that you were really excited about. And it's counterintuitive. You'd think, oh, I've got all this extra time on my hands. I'm going to lean into my support network more. But as many people out there, I'm sure depression and anxiety are extremely common. Lots of
Right.
people watching this right now deal with depression. And when you're depressed, when you're going through a tough time emotionally, it's the opposite. The tendency is to withdraw from your support network. The tendency is to stop doing those behaviors and routines that are
Those
good for
regular
you.
things, absolutely. And those
You can't
routines,
rely on your emotional state to get you through those things.
or
Commit.
to come up with those things you think you need to do in that
Right.
moment, it feels like a monumental effort. But if it's routine, if it's part of your habit, it's easier. Right. And
It's
so
it's easier.
yeah,
Make that your
much.
first commitment. Commit to your health first. And by the way, not just if you were laid off. I think every single person would benefit from doing this, from reassessing what's important to me as a person, separate from my work, right? And those are the things I'm going to fall back on. That's my downtime procedures for my life, my support network, the people I love
Yes.
and who love me, right? My relationship with my therapists and my doctors, right?
In
Like
fact,
things
your
like that.
therapist is going to join us on the show shortly now. Surprise. No. But
She's
no,
backstage
that's
now. Here she comes. Yeah.
no, this is fantastic. I think we're going to have a couple more probably follow up episodes talk about that. But key takeaway is um, go back to the fundamentals, basics, your health, your emotional well being. Um, make some sort of routine, make it a routine where you actually do that. From an emotional well-being, which is something we didn't talk about that much earlier on, but we kind of brought it up, which is fantastic. And also from a tactical standpoint is, reflecting, observing, things like that. So this is fantastic. I think, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing these insights.
Thank
I
you for
hope
having
our
me. This has been a lot of fun. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Yes, absolutely. Maybe next time we'll do it, and we'll have jungle creatures on and no, this.
We'll see.
Thanks a lot, Shane, and this was awesome. This was just I love the conversation we had after that post offline, and I'm really happy. Thank you so much for making the time and bringing some of that experience and your knowledge and sharing it with others.
Thanks for sharing your platform. The pleasure is all mine.
All right. I hope everyone has a great rest of the week, guys. Reach out. We'll be talking more. Shane will be back for sure. We'll talk about more. And maybe next time we'll talk about, like the interview process and how can you use some of the principles and things from Agile there even. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the week until next time.